Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Queens of Commerce. I'm Shannon Hodock.
And I'm Stephanie Nelson, and we are the Queens of Commerce, and we may have gave ourselves that title.
But if we're not going to do it, who else?
So let's start a little bit about us. We're each going to share a little bit of who we are, our journey in the industry, and then we'll get in a little bit more about the queens themselves. So Shannon, why don't you start?
All right. Shannon Hodock, SVP of Business Development at the Acosta Group. I'm a mom of two. I have always been a working mom. I grew up in the industry. My dad was in the industry. And I've always been on the agency side. I've never worked for a manufacturer or retailer. I've gotten some good exposure there, but I am your traditional agency person. How about you, Steph?
So I'm Stephanie, and I have two kids, a son and a daughter, and we are in Minneapolis. We love the cold, apparently, but the summers there are great. I started my career in the agency space, but then spent a decade at the retailer known as Target, and I came into that space when retail media was just in its conception. And so got to see the industry sort of shape in front of my eyes. And now I've been here at the Acosta Group just shy of 2 years, and it's still ever evolving.
And we are so happy to have you. I'm so glad we're on the same team together. So do we want to talk a little bit about the origin of the Queens of Commerce?
Yes. Well, as some might not know, Shannon and I, we travel quite a bit together. And so last fall, we were at grocery shop, and there may have been a glass of wine or two. And lo and behold, we came up with this idea.
And everybody gravitated towards us, or towards the idea, I should say. They thought it would be really fun for us to come in and add some personal experiences to the industry information and data and insights and points of view that we have, and just make it a little bit more interesting.
Well, and what you're going to come to find out, like podcast is intended to be open, honest, and hopefully helpful, meaning we're not going to try to break it down into all of this jargon and buzzwords. It's going to be having a conversation with the coworkers you actually like.
Well, and I think some of these conversations people don't want to have, right? And we're going to be brave enough to have them and say everything that's on our mind, because that's just who we are.
Yes. So a little bit about how podcast is going to be structured to get you oriented to our episode format. So each week, Shannon and I are going to give you what we're going to call the 2-minute drill. We're going to give you a little peek behind the curtain of what's been happening in our lives since we last talked to you. Then we'll have a core content coptic, and we will sometimes have guests. Sometimes you'll just hear us, but it'll be fun, I promise.
We're always going to close with our hot take. And that will be one thing, a little bit of information for everyone to take away and think about as they move on with their business day, their personal life. How is it going to affect them? How does it affect their business? But it'll be a short little snippet.
Yes, we're going to talk about what's happening for real, what's working, what's not, and what's broken. And so that leads us to our first topic. It may sound basic, but it's surprisingly complex. So Shannon, what's our first topic?
Commerce. How do people define commerce? How do they talk about commerce? It's an industry term that has turned into a little bit of a catch-all, but at the same time, it really does bring all the different aspects of our business under one umbrella. I think commerce is a little bit subjective in terms of how people define it. It kind of depends on your background and what you work on. I think we see it as this very holistic approach that has multiple touch points, but I don't know. We talked to a few people today and their definitions were a little dicey.
Well, I mean, but that's it right there. You could talk to 14 different people and get 14 different definitions, and 5 of them might actually contradict themselves, meaning totally different ends of the spectrum. And it really goes back to that principle you just talked about. They're coming from different parts or different angles based on their role.
And then I think you add in all these other elements, right? So it's the shopper journey is so different in terms of the access they have to information, which makes them have this always on approach, right? So it's not just about the brand message. It's not just about the sales plan. It's all the stuff in between that is really meaningful to catch the eye of that shopper and get them to make a purchase and convert them into being loyal to your brands.
Yeah, but let's stop and think about this. 20 years ago, I mean, brands could look at this so linearly. you had a person that was, you were trying to capture their attention to get them in store to buy your product. So, yes, online has added complexity, but that's not the only layer anymore. The shopping journey is this ever evolving thing. And you've got online, you've got retail media, you've got social commerce, you've got D2Cs, you've got all these new marketplaces popping up. And all of a sudden, it's just this giant umbrella that becomes this catch all, but nobody can really break it down and fully explain it.
Well, and then like who owns it, right? Because every company has a different approach. Sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's sale, and the whole thing is quite honestly a journey.
Yes. Well, and that's where you've got to take a step back. If we sort of remove ourselves from our roles and our expertise, it all comes back to one sort of pivotal center point, the shopper's decision. The second they realize that they need something, whether that be in a store, whether that be delivered in a box to their door, or whether that's some sort of fulfillment mechanism like DoorDash or Instacart, it can happen anywhere.
It's actually really crazy because, like you mentioned, 20 years ago, there were only so many places to buy. And you went to a clothing store to buy clothing and you went to the grocery store to buy groceries. They're like, Walmart wasn't even that big 20 years ago, right?
Yes. Oh my,
And
no.
now,
I would not have been caught dead in a
well,
Walmart 20 years ago.
I'm in New Jersey. I barely have a Walmart there now. But like, I moved to Bentonville for 2 years and it was a completely different experience. It's just bananas how much has changed.
Yeah. Well, and that's really what commerce is really about, the people. How are we removing the friction, giving them the inspiration to connect them to brands to meet human need? It doesn't matter where that's happening. So we have to have people stop obsessing over the channel that it's happening in. We have to have people stop thinking about this last click, and we have to think about this long-term impact. We've got to break down these silos. It isn't sales, it isn't media, it isn't creative, it isn't retail media. Add another department that'll probably come out next week. That's where it all gets lost.
It's complicated and simple all at the same time, but everybody's got to approach it in this new, innovative way to make it effective. So I think, that's part of what Acosta Group's perspective is and how we've developed this brand new agency. It's a year old. We had all of these capabilities, but we poured it into the center of excellence. And it's all about focusing on the shopper experience. And how do we help our brands accelerate growth by targeting the right people at the right time when they want to be spoken to? Now, that line alone does sound like traditional shopper marketing, but it's absolutely different because there's so many
Absolutely.
different ways to reach them, right? We said that earlier.
Yeah. Well, because it's about working, all of those things working together. So you have to have everybody at the table to ensure it's all working together. I've had the chance over my career to work with some incredible brands, but the marketplace is constantly shifting. And I've seen brands that have died as a result of not evolving. Early in my career, I got the opportunity to work on BlackBerry. And I know I'm maybe dating myself. Some may not even know what that is, and it's not a fruit. It was an industry leading smartphone before the likes of the iPhone came along, but they didn't evolve and they were left in the dust. And so this is no different than that. That was a consumer need, a shopping need that changed and evolved, and the brand didn't evolve with it.
And I think evolution is key, right? Nothing is going to be static. Nothing is going to be black and white. And everybody sort of has to have a flexible mindset and keep the end in mind. Like, what is that
Yeah.
growth opportunity and what does it come down to? So I know you identified 3 truths within the commerce ecosystem. You want to go through those?
Yes. So we'll talk through them at a very high level, and then we'll break each of those down for our consumers. So first, it starts with the shopper. We cannot look at it as a channel. Second is we have to think about it beyond on-site or beyond the retailer. And we'll get into what a little bit that means in just a second. And then the last one is this idea of we can't be chasing this last click. We have to be thinking about the way that we're going to drive long-term growth. And that means that it may sacrifice sacrifice efficiency of a return in the short term. So Shannon, let's break down the first one.
Okay, shopper, that is my jam. I love the shopper. That's my background. But before you spend a single dollar on anything marketing related, you have to make sure you understand your shopper. Who are they? Where are they? What do they shop? What competitive brands do they buy? How many shopping trips do they make? What are the intent around those shopping trips? And you just have a lot of context, and you really need to understand their behavior. It's kind of like being a sociologist a little bit, right? Is really works best when you have that basic understanding. I think you've got to layer in your business objectives, right? And you have to tie those two together. But your business objectives are for you. They're very self-serving, right? So you have to understand that shopper and tie it into how to drive those business objectives.
Yeah. So number 2 is we've got to think beyond on-site. And what I mean by that, beyond the retailer. Amazon just announced at the beginning of the year that it no longer cared if you were a brand that sold on their platform, if you
So
directed traffic
crazy.
there.
It's so crazy.
That is making a statement. That is basically saying, I feel so awesome about all of my real intent signals and the data that I have that I know that I don't want to get in the way of the way that the shopper wants to engage with that brand. I am just going to be there to provide that brand with a platform to be able to reach that consumer in that right moment, in the right place, at the right time.
It's fascinating that they have that much power, right?
It's constantly blowing up the marketing funnel. And by the way, if I see one more marketing funnel on a PowerPoint deck, I might lose it.
Thing you talked about is just building your plans and the opportunities for the long game, right? So we talk a lot about ROAS. Everybody's talking about ROAS, but what is it that you like to say? Those retailers are grading their own homework, right? So we have to think beyond ROAS, and we have to balance efficiency with experimentation, but also performance and brand health. So those all that is just not just advertising impressions, right? Like old school too, right? This has to be multiple inputs to understand if you're actually driving that growth.
Well, as I always say, and Shannon loves this one, I've never seen anybody get a bad grade from a retail media
and also
network.
too, like, I don't know, even some of the ROIs, you're like, what are you talking about? How is that possible? But yeah.
Well, it's the logic test usually doesn't pass.
Well, and then everybody's like, but now we have iROAS. I'm like, I'm not sure that's really helpful either. Anyway.
Okay, so let's give you a bonus because, again, I think in today's age, what we also have talked about is you're going to have to embrace the change before it forces you to. So if you just come with this mindset that the industry is going to evolve and it's going to change faster than you can ever imagine at any point in time, retail media, AI, automations, these shopping behaviors aren't going to change. They're already here. And so you've got to be able to test, learn. And that's a part of why we want this podcast. We don't want these things to live in silos. We want you to see how the things come together in practice. And it isn't this over here or over there. It's about how the things work together.
When we are seeing the brands that have the guts to do the test and learns are learning so much more about their shopper behavior too, on top of it, right? So you may test something and it may fail, but you're still going to learn. And that's the most important thing of the age of evolution that we're in, is it's all about learning, pivoting, optimizing.
Yeah. So that actually brings us to our hot take of the week. And it may set up a future topic, but we're going to give you a little teaser about it right now. And what's that topic, Shannon?
Agentic AI. And if you haven't heard about it yet, you're living a cave.
Yep. And we're really not trying to be dramatic. Like literally it is shifting the way demand generation happens today. And we are both living examples of how we both do that every single day now.
We've seen all of these major retailers, including PayPal, launch these agent-driven buying programs. And they are really making a difference in how people make choices about their brands. I think, people are talking about it like it's in the future. The future is now. Like this is accelerated so much faster than anybody ever expected. It's already here. So it's too late if you haven't thought about how this is going to affect your business, but you got to pivot, you got to test and learn, and you got to figure out what you're going to do moving forward. But the one thing I would say is like, be brave, be bold. And like, you have to try something different. You can't just do the old school, slap the same plan on the next year and maybe add a little bit of money. It's important to learn how this affects your business.
Yeah. Well, the reality is If you don't embrace this change with the way that this is changing the way consumers shop, you're just not going to even show up as an option to buy. Like you're just going to be left behind. And let me just give you a real life example of breaking it down kind of real simply through a life example of myself. So as a family, we're all going to Hawaii in March. My nieces and nephews, my parents, like it's going to be this whole big thing. This last month, it was my niece's 6-year-old birthday. So I went to ChatGPT and I started to ask it a series of prompts of it was my 6-year-old niece. It was for her birthday. I wanted it to go with this snorkeling package that I had already bought or associated with this trip to Hawaii. And all of a sudden, it gave me 5 different ideas of different things that I could buy. I further refined it and said I only wanted to spend $50, and it came back with 5 other suggestions. But then one of them that really stuck out was this idea of an underwater camera, and it was a kid's underwater camera. So something that I knew that she wouldn't break, giving me a couple of different options. And so I was like, well, help me weigh the pros and cons between that.
Pros and cons. Like it is debating with you at this point, right?
Yes, yes. And so then I land on a camera. And I already knew I was a Walmart Plus member. And I had to tell it one last thing. I needed it by Sunday. It was Wednesday. It showed me the ones that I could have delivered in their 48-hour window. I didn't go to Google. I didn't even go to Walmart. I did it all within the confines of ChatGPT.
And that's how people are using it now. They're not going to Google. They're putting everything in chat. It's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. So long story short, if you're not thinking about your agentic AI strategy, probably should start tomorrow.
Yeah. So we'll go into this topic in more detail in some upcoming episodes. But that's really all we have for today. What are we going to talk about in our next episode, Shannon?
We're going to talk about the things nobody tells you about related to commerce.
It's going to be good. It'll be juicy. I
Might
think
be a little bit of
hear some good
gossip,
ones.
a little bit of experience sharing, but it'll definitely be interesting.
And again, it's not going to be your textbook stuff. No onboarding guide tells you what we're about to tell you in this next episode.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll listen to the next episode.
Yep.